Pneumatic Training Panel, En Ino8747 Exercise Number 2. Welcome to this module Pneumatic Training Panel, En Ino8747 Exercise Number 2.
By the end of this module, you will be able, using a cycle diagram, to build a circuit made up of a cylinder controlled by two push buttons which are operated simultaneously. You will be able to connect the circuit and confirm that it works correctly.
Let's begin by describing the cycle diagram for this application.
When the PB1 and PB2 buttons are pressed, the cylinder rod extends. When the PB1 or PB2 button is released, the cylinder rod retracts.
In the following stage, you will need to determine which pneumatic circuit corresponds with this diagram.
Complete the circuit using the correct components in order to match the cycle diagram which was previously described.
Take a detailed look at how this application's pneumatic circuit works. Initially, the cylinder is in the retracted position. By pressing the PB1 button, the air passes through the valve but it is stopped by the second valve. Therefore, the PB2 button must also be pressed in order for the air to reach the pilot valve of the supply valve, causing it to change its status. The air is then supplied to the head end port of the cylinder, while the rod end port becomes an exhaust. The cylinder rod extends. In this example, both buttons, PB1 and PB2, remain pressed down, therefore the cylinder completes its full stroke. When both buttons, PB1 and PB2, are released, the air which supplied the pilot is purged and the supply valve returns to its initial state thanks to the return spring. The air is then supplied to the rod end port of the cylinder, while the head end port becomes an exhaust. The cylinder rod retracts and completes its full stroke. Note that if only one of the two buttons were released, the same result would be produced.
We just showed you an initial circuit which is the simplest solution for this application.
But, instead of connecting the two valves, PB1 and PB2, in a series, you could also use an AND function, as shown in the circuit on the right. In terms of the mode of operation, the result is exactly the same. Adding the AND function will increase the cost of the system, without providing any additional benefit.
Before handling, what precautions must be followed?
Regarding the quality of the compressed air, the supply pressure must be 0.4 megapascal or more. You must use non-lubricated air. The supply air must be purged of all contaminants, water, oil, or other condensates. Be sure to have an upstream filter for the training panel's regulator. When handling the training panel, keep the pressure relief valve at the exhaust position during the construction or disassembly phases of the circuit. Before supplying a cylinder, verify that none of the ports are open, that all of the tubes are connected, and that nothing is impeding the movement of the cylinder. Keep your hands away from the cylinders while they are moving. Now that you understand how the pneumatic circuit works, let's move on to its practical implementation.
Start by connecting the components highlighted in red on the photograph, following the pneumatic circuit. We recommend that you use
the blue tube for the air supply. The green tube is for the circuit to extend the cylinder rod. And the yellow tube is for the circuit to retract the cylinder rod.
Then adjust the speed controllers by opening them to turns from their closed positions. Finally, adjust the pressure of the regulator to 0.3 megapascal. You can now open the pressure relief valve by turning it to the supply position. Remember to keep your hands away from the moving rod.
Press the green button, PB1, and watch what happens. Press the red button, PB2, and watch what happens. Press the green button, PB1, and the red button, PB2, simultaneously and watch what happens. Release both buttons and watch what happens. You can repeat this operation several times, trying to release only one button.
When you have finished, close a pressure relief valve by turning it to the exhaust position, and then go to the quiz on the next slide. Having made the circuit work, which of the following statements are correct? Base your answers on your observations. If you have completed the circuit correctly, these are the results that you should expect. The blue tube is used for the air supply. Starting from the pressure relief valve, we supply port 1P of the supply valve, then the green buttons in port. The green tube is used to extend the cylinder rod, so it connects the green buttons out port to the red buttons in port, then the red buttons out port to the pilot valve of the 2-position 5-way monostable supply valve. It then exits the 4A port in order to supply the head end port of the cylinder. Finally, the yellow tube is used to retract the cylinder rod. It exits the 2B port to supply the rod end port of the cylinder. The speed controllers are adjusted by opening them to turns from their closed positions. The pressure of the regulator is adjusted to 0.3 megapascal. The pressure relief valve is then opened. Then both the green button, PB1, and the red button, PB2, are pressed. You can see the rod extend. Once this first movement has been completed, both buttons are released. You will subsequently see the rod retract. You can see that pressing only one of the two buttons causes no movement whatsoever. Likewise, if one of the two buttons is released whilst the rod is extending, it will immediately retract without completing its stroke.
Thank you for completing this module on pneumatic training panel, En Ino8747 exercise number 2.
We invite you to continue with exercise number 3.